The 2010 winner of the Best Tall Building in Europe award is the Broadcasting Place in Leeds in the United Kingdom, and with us are the building's architect, Alex Whitbread, who's with Feilden, Clegg, Bradley in Bath, England, and in London they have offices, and George Downing, who's the developer. And Broadcasting Place is certainly a striking building, and of course the thing that jumps out at you right away is the building's appearance. What did you ask for originally in the development of this building, and how did this design evolve?
Well, as I previously mentioned, when you're developing in the regional cities in England, it's very difficult to come up with a development plan for quality buildings of this type of height, which are affordable. The end use was going to be for students, and you've got to have something that's great in design. It's got an international appearance to help with the university's reputation, and but on the same time it's got to be affordable for kids to live in. So it was a very difficult task that we set, Alex and his team, particularly because we're next door to broadcasting one of the BBC's a listed building. I think it's actually the first place that motion pictures were taken, so it's a historic building with a lot of architectural importance, and next door to that we wanted to go high in what is a very tight site, and that was roughly rough and tough. The brief, we wanted a real quality product, but we wanted to spend little money in the terms of the scale of the project, you know.
Well, speaking of project scale, this building is 228 feet tall, 23 floors and 70 meters, so it's certainly going to stick out. I don't guess there's anything even remotely that tall around it, right? So that's a challenge, certainly.
But on top of that is on the brow of a hill, on the top of a hill. So whatever you build there, the height is going to really be very prominent, and is very prominent on the Leeds landscape, you know. It sort of makes it feel like the tallest building in Leeds.
So there's a challenge because it stands out so much, and from a design standpoint, what were your challenges and how did you solve them in being so conspicuous?
Well, I think one of the interesting challenges is because this building is sort of built in combination with accommodation for the Leeds Met University, which is their Faculty of Arts and Design. So it's basically their architecture school, their graphic design. So to bring a whole sequence of buildings together, which combines the tower and the academic facilities, brings into play the broadcasting house, the listed building, and creates a sort of a new mixed-use community, in effect, was a real challenge for us, because it's within a conservation area, lots of listed protected buildings around it. But also to build a building up on the skyline is a great challenge as well. And we contrasted it with a number of buildings in the city where you had quite low-rise portions of the building and then towers coming out from that. The City Hall, some of the major university buildings, big buildings that have been built in the Victorian period, which we took as our kind of design precedents really for how some of the design evolved.
We also forgot to mention the small task of encompassing the Baptist church,
of course, the Baptists,
inside the scheme.
Yeah.
Which you can imagine, there was a live church that we had to keep it live, and they were very willing partners, actually. You know, as long as we could deliver something that was quality. But you can imagine Alex and my development team having to go along to sell the scheme to the Baptist ministers, and but it all went seamlessly, really. So.
Well, you've certainly broken up the box form.
Yes.
In this, and how did that originate? Where did that come from?
Well, West Yorkshire is very strong on its sculptural traditions. You know, Henry Moore, Barbara Hepworth are all from the region, and they drew a lot of their influence from the local landscape, which up in the sort of moors and the hills to the north is quite rugged. And we took some of those forms as part of the generators for some of our design ideas in terms of how this building was sculpted. But also looking at some of these older buildings, as I said, which are actually quite simple and quite rugged and quite monolithic in a sense, and just turning that on its head, because if you look at how this building actually stacks up, it actually doesn't get smaller as it goes up, it gets bigger. So you get the big bits up on the hill, as George said, from the distance, where you see the scale from the distance. But when you come close to the building, it actually becomes a bit more intimate, so that you're not overpowered by it. You know, the mass goes away from you. And I think we wanted to create something that was quite bold in the city, because it's been architecturally quite conservative for a while. And I think ourselves, working with the city planners and the city architect, were quite keen for something that was really striking and new. And it was amazing how the city kind of took to that and engaged with it as we went through. There was very little opposition. There was a lot of comment when it was built, but there was little opposition as it went through.
Well, and the way that you've achieved that, kept that intimacy there at street level, is that the building blocks are small at
Yes.
street level. If you look at the illustration of the building, and then they get larger
Exactly.
as they go up.
Yeah.
But a changing facade as well. That's really the interesting thing of the core sound panels. You know, it changes, the look changes every several months. You can notice a difference in the colouring of the panel. You know, so whilst you say the word monoglyphic is a fair description, but also it seems a lot softer when you're on site, and the mood of the place does change. With the season, with the weather changing the colour of the panels.
I imagine the building, of course, looks different from just about every angle. You get a different aspect on it, and
that's right. It's so different from so many angles. That's a really a big point, actually. You can look at the building. It is so different from so many angles. That sums it up. It really is.
So what was the response in conservative England about a building like this? They liked it. You got a lot of comments, but not a lot of opposition.
I think that I'd like to say that the response was actually overwhelming. The support for the building. Sure, there will have been some criticisms, but overall the response has been fantastic. You know, it was voted the best building in Leeds for the last 100 years by the Leeds community, and I think in the Yorkshire. Had several awards in the Yorkshire area, and I think that's a great accolade to what Alex and his team have the design that they come up with. And it's a really big test, as I said before, and it's something that mustn't be understated. It's very difficult in regional cities to come up with the quality buildings that we come up with, and the guys were right on the money with what they've come up with there, you know, in terms of design. We were very big on how the building was going to be used internally. They've delivered that as well. The tenants in the building are very happy. It's got a great feeling inside, and it's fit for purpose, and a very sustainable building.
When you look at this building from the outside, of course, you get the different segments of the building and kind of the stacked box appearance. What's it like on the inside for people who live there? Is it an open-airy feeling? What were you going for there?
Well, it's very bright inside the building, and it's student accommodation, like student apartments, and it's if the proof's always in the pudding with how a building performs. And that building was the first building to fill up in Leeds from a term of occupancy, and it always fills up several months before the end of a term, or we only had 2 terms. That proves its popularity. I noticed this year that there's been a lot of international students take up a residency in the building, which is interesting. And obviously that's, I think a big part of that is because of the design of the building. You know, there's lots of accommodation available in Leeds. It's a very, very competitive market. And I think that's testament to the quality of the design. It's a building that's fully occupied. It's probably the most popular letting student building in the city. As I said to you, the Leeds population have voted for their most popular building over the last 100 years, and that was the winner, which is a testament to the outside and really to the inside by virtue of the fact it's full, and has been so for the past 2 letting seasons.
I'm glad to know it's that. I didn't realise it was been that popular on the take-up. That's great. I mean, I think obviously, you know, you're dealing with student accommodation. You know, it's sort of in a sense is fairly standard. but in a sense it's not, because as George said, you do get this totally different relationship with where you are. It's a completely car-free development apart from a few spaces for the disabled. It's right in the city, it's part of the city, it's not divorced from it. And I think that's something that's really fundamental. You're part of the campus, really, which other residential developments in the city aren't. So you're fully integrated into the university. Also, the building is oriented so that you're maximising eastern and western light rather than having any southern light, so that you've got very balanced light into the rooms. They're all naturally ventilated. You know, there are sort of aspects there which keep them nice and fresh and good to live in, I would say.
Well, in that respect, one of the things that you notice from the illustration is that there are no windows, on the entire southern exposure.
Yes.
And that was intentional, obviously, but the reason behind that is
twofold. One, I would say that it means that you don't have communal rooms which will overheat, which have to have additional treatment to the glass. The other reason is really because that's the elevation that faces the city, and that's the elevation where that you have the maximum sculptural impact relative to the city. So all the rooms down that side have eastern and western facing windows, which we mapped out with the building research establishment in Britain, where all the facades of those buildings were mapped to maximise the daylight at certain times. So that's why the facades change as they work around the buildings. But that southern elevation, we felt that you could minimise the solar heat gain on that, but at the same time create a completely different architectural form from that. So it was a twofold reason.
I can't stress enough the price point. That's a massive thing. Part of the university's pastoral care for their students. They want products that are affordable to the students. And you'll notice the building next door, the commercial element to this building is actually Leeds Met's art faculty. So, whilst the design is paramount, it's also the sustainability and low-cost builds for the students who are tenanting it are also a major factor in why the building's a success.
Were there any unique aspects of the construction phase of this in terms of what you were able to save since this building is on a budget? What kind of construction techniques helped keep the cost of this down? Anything in particular?
Northern grit.
Yes.
Working well with your subcontractors, but nothing that I could say, basically just a very well managed job. There's nothing, I can't think of anything that was really outside the box in terms of the project, the building management. That there could be also the contractor who built the building. But
no special considerations because of the building shape? Did that make it any easier or harder?
No, it's more difficult actually, especially with the weight of the core 10 panels. They're very heavy panels, so that was a lot more work for the contractor with the facade than you normally got. We've got a lot of weight in them, Alex and his team were. They wanted to make sure that we didn't use a lighter weight of panel because they didn't think that that had the durability and the sustainability of a thinner panel, which is about £500,000 cheaper to use. So we had to go for the heavier panel, and that was actually it made it more difficult to load up. Obviously, it's a relatively tall building, and it was more difficult for the subcontractors to load up, as I've said.
Are there aspects of this building, the design of this building, that can be exported to other places? Is this a prototype that you see maybe being followed in other places? Or is this truly an individual building for this site?
From my point of view, I think that we should be site-specific on the design, We haven't got a building that looks like that. I think that it should be site-specific. I wouldn't like to try and just keep replicating the building. I don't think that's the way we would work as a developer, and we are currently going to work with Feilden Clegg on other sites that we're about to acquire or have acquired. And I don't think so, personally. I don't know. Maybe you guys will build another version of it somewhere.
No, I think you're right. Sometimes you do like to create sort of a one-off, very bespoke building like that, but I think there are aspects of how that scheme came together and the aspects of bringing taller buildings into certain environments, or relatively tall buildings in this case, combining them with different types of uses that means that there's a play-off between the two, so that not only in terms of urban design and urban regeneration, but also in terms of how the scheme stacks, so they can all work very closely together. I mean, I think there are aspects in terms of how facades and things can evolve and how you can use daylighting analysis and parametrics to actually develop architectural elevations which can work on other schemes. But I think there's something really quite specific about how that scheme is massed and where it is that I think hopefully does come across when you actually go and visit the place.
When you read the jury statement and what the awards jury said, that Broadcasting Place succeeds on many levels, addressing city and urban design, respect for surrounding heritage buildings, and a richness of architectural design. Its references to geological and sculptural context make the building intimately local, contemporary, and beautiful at the same time. It creates a unique and interesting form on the Leeds skyline, and no doubt has probably done a little bit for the university too in terms of raising its image.
It's a massive thing. Well, the austerity measures that you've read about and heard about in England at the moment, it's so important for universities to be able to compete on the international stage. England is a very popular place for international students to come. It's a way of creating industry in England, the educational sector, for inward investments into the country, and the universities do need buildings that are of international quality. Design is the starting point for everything that we do on the educational sector, which is the biggest part of our business. And as you've, I mean, it was very eloquently put. We could do with one of the judges on the chair with us to answer some of our questions, but the buildings do need to be of a truly international quality, and I believe that's what we've got here in Leeds, care of Alex and his team.
Well, thank you for coming to Chicago, and congratulations on your award.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
Thanks for speaking with us.
Very nice to meet you.
Thanks.